Imagine this: a high-powered CEO, a man who built a multi-million-dollar empire from nothing, walks into a boardroom. The stakes are high, tensions even higher. A single comment from a rival, one sharp, calculated jab, ignites something deep inside him. His face flushes red, his fists clench, and in a split second, without thinking, he explodes, yelling, cursing, slamming his fist on the table. The deal collapses, his reputation shatters, investors pull out. Within months, his empire crumbles, all because of one moment of unchecked anger. Now, what if I told you that anger is an illusion and you've been tricked your entire life? You don't get angry because of what happens to you. You get angry because of how you interpret it. The truth is, anger is not a force beyond your control. It's not an unchangeable part of who you are. It's a mental habit, one that you've been conditioned to accept. But here's the secret: you can break free. By the time you finish this video, something inside you will shift. You will see anger for what it truly is, a deception, and once you see through it, you will never be angry again. Part 1. The shocking truth. Anger is not a real emotion. There was a time when anger ruled my life. I thought it was an instinct, a primal force that surged through me like a storm, uncontrollable and inevitable. I believed that when someone insulted me, disrespected me, or crossed a line, my anger was justified, an automatic, rightful response. But I was wrong. What if I told you that anger is not a real emotion, but a programmed reaction? That you weren't born with it, but conditioned into believing that you must react with rage when the world doesn't go your way? Think back to your childhood. The first time you threw a tantrum, how did the adults around you react? Did they scold you? Did they raise their voices? Maybe they got angry themselves, teaching you that anger was a valid way to gain attention, to exert control. Or maybe they ignored you until your frustration boiled over. Either way, you learned something crucial. Anger wasn't just a feeling, it was a tool, a weapon, a means of survival. But here's the shocking truth. Anger is not a natural human emotion like joy, sadness, or love. It is a learned response, a result of conditioning and reinforcement. And the sooner you understand this, the sooner you will realize that you never have to be angry again. Ancient Stoics knew this over 2,000 years ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He understood that anger is not caused by external events, but by our interpretation of those events. You don't get angry because someone insulted you. You get angry because you believe their words have power over you. If you remove that belief, the anger vanishes. Let's test this with a simple thought experiment. Imagine walking down the street and someone yells at you in a foreign language, one you don't understand. They could be insulting you, calling you every vile name in the book. But since you don't comprehend the words, do you feel rage? Do you feel your blood boil? No. You might feel confused, curious, or even amused, but not angry. Now, change the scenario. Imagine the exact same words in a language you understand. Suddenly, your chest tightens, your fists clench, and you feel the familiar surge of heat. What changed? Not the words themselves. They remained the same. The only difference is your interpretation. The meaning you assigned to those words determined your emotional reaction. This is proof that anger is not an external force. It is a mental construct, created entirely by you. Most people believe that anger is uncontrollable because it happens so fast. One moment you're fine, and the next you're furious. It feels automatic, but that's just an illusion. Your brain is constantly interpreting events before you even consciously realize it. Every time something happens, your mind assigns meaning to it based on past experiences, beliefs, and conditioning. That's why the same event can trigger anger in one person and indifference in another. If anger were truly natural, it would be universal. But it's not. It's entirely subjective, built on perception, culture, and personal history. Consider how anger is viewed across different cultures. In some societies, public displays of anger are considered normal, even respected. In others, they are seen as shameful and weak. If anger were truly an innate, natural response, wouldn't it be the same everywhere? The fact that it varies so much proves that it is not inherent. It is taught, reinforced, and absorbed. So, if anger is a mental illusion, why does it feel so real? Because your brain is wired to reinforce patterns. Every time you get angry and act on it, by shouting, retaliating, or lashing out, your brain strengthens the connection. It rewards the behavior with a temporary feeling of power, a fleeting sense of control. But over time, this pattern becomes a prison. You don't control your anger controls you. Now imagine if you could rewire your brain to no longer see anger as a necessary response. Imagine if you could observe a situation without immediately attaching an emotional reaction to it. This is exactly what the Stoics mastered. They trained themselves to insert a gap between stimulus and response. Instead of reacting automatically, they paused, they questioned, they reinterpreted. And by doing so, they dismantled the illusion of anger entirely. This is not just philosophy. It's backed by neuroscience. Studies show that when you delay your reaction to an emotional trigger, even by a few seconds, the intensity of the emotion drops significantly. The longer you wait, the weaker it becomes. Anger thrives on immediacy. If you break the instant reaction cycle, you starve it of power. You might be thinking, but sometimes anger is necessary. What about injustice? What about standing up for yourself? This is where most people get it wrong. You don't need anger to take action. You need clarity. You need strength. You need calm, focused determination. The most powerful people in history didn't let anger control them. They used logic, strategy, and composure to win battles, change laws, and shift the course of history. Anger clouds judgment. It makes you impulsive. And worst of all, it makes you predictable. Think about that for a moment. If someone knows exactly how to push your buttons and make you react with rage, they own you. They control you like a puppet. The moment you let anger dictate your response, you hand over your power. But if you remain calm, if you choose not to engage, suddenly you become untouchable. So, what's the alternative? How do you escape the anger trap for good? The answer is retraining your mind to detach from the illusion of anger. Instead of reacting, observe. Instead of fueling the fire, step back and see it for what it really is, just a series of thoughts. When you do this consistently, something incredible happens. The same situations that once triggered you no longer have an effect. The insults, the criticism, the disrespect, they all lose their power over you, because you have reclaimed your true strength, the power over your own mind. And here's the most powerful realization of all. Once you see through the illusion of anger, you will never be angry again. Not because life stops challenging you, not because people suddenly become kind and fair, but because you finally understand that anger was never real to begin with. Part 2. The gap between event and response. How Stoics neutralize anger. There was once a man who spent years letting his anger dictate his life. Every insult, every slight, Every inconvenience sent him into a spiral of rage. He lashed out at his colleagues, shouted at his family, and even broke things in moments of uncontrollable fury. But then, one day, something changed. He didn't wake up a new person. He didn't meditate for years or read 100 self-help books. He simply learned to do one thing: create a gap between what happened to him and how he responded. And in that gap, everything changed. This is where most people get it wrong. They believe that anger is a direct response to an external event. Someone insults you. You get mad. Someone cuts you off in traffic. You honk and curse. But this is an illusion. There is always a space, a moment of choice between what happens and how you react. The difference between those who are controlled by anger and those who remain calm is what they do in that space. Epictetus, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, understood this over 2,000 years ago. He said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Most people live their entire lives without realizing that this is the key to emotional control. They move through the world as if they are puppets, believing that their emotions are dictated by external events. But the truth is, nothing has the power to make you angry unless you give it that power. Imagine holding a cup of boiling water. Someone bumps into you, and the water spills all over your hand, burning you. Naturally, you react. You flinch, you pull away, you feel pain. But here's the difference. Anger is not like pain. It is not automatic. It is a choice. If someone insults you, it is not the words that create your anger. It is your interpretation of those words. You are the one who assigns meaning to them. This is why the Stoics developed a simple but profound system for breaking the anger cycle. It is called the STOP method, and it works instantly. The next time you feel anger rising, do this. See the trigger. The moment something upsets you, stop and identify exactly what caused it. Was it the words someone used? Was it their tone? Was it the feeling of being disrespected? Simply recognizing the trigger creates distance between the event and your reaction. Take a deep breath. This might sound simple, but it is scientifically proven to deactivate your amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for emotional reactions. A single deep breath shifts control from your emotional mind to your rational mind. It forces a pause, preventing you from acting impulsively. Observe your thoughts. Instead of being swept away by your emotions, take a moment to analyze them. Ask yourself, is my reaction justified? Am I making assumptions? Is this worth my peace of mind? The act of observation alone weakens anger's grip on you. It makes you realize that most of the time, your anger is not about reality, but about the story you're telling yourself. Put things into perspective. Now, zoom out. Imagine yourself 5 years into the future. Will this moment still matter? Will you even remember it? If not, why waste energy on it? Ask yourself, if I were Marcus Aurelius, how would I respond? The Stoics believed that most things in life are trivial. The only true measure of power is your ability to control yourself. This method sounds simple, but it is life-changing. Consider the story of a man who once struggled with uncontrollable rage. He was a successful businessman, respected but feared by those around him. His temper was legendary. Employees walked on eggshells, knowing that the smallest mistake could set him off. But then one day, he came across the teachings of Epictetus and decided to try something different. The next time someone made an error, he felt the familiar heat rising in his chest. But instead of reacting, he paused. He identified the trigger. He took a deep breath. He observed his thoughts. And then something strange happened. The anger he had felt began to dissolve. He saw the situation for what it really was, just a moment in time, not worth his energy. That single moment changed the trajectory of his life. Over time, he rewired his brain. The reactions that once felt inevitable became optional. His relationships improved, his health improved, and most importantly, he reclaimed his power. There is an old saying, "He who angers you controls you." Think about that for a moment. Every time you react in anger, you are allowing someone else to dictate your emotions. They are pulling the strings. You are their puppet. But what happens when you refuse to react? What happens when you master the gap between event and response? Suddenly, you become untouchable. Think of the most powerful leaders, the most influential figures in history, the ones who remained composed in the face of chaos. They were not controlled by their emotions. They controlled their emotions. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet he never let anger dictate his decisions. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison, yet he emerged without hatred. They understood something that most people never do. Anger is weakness disguised as strength. Some people fear that if they don't react with anger, they will be seen as weak. But the opposite is true. A person who controls their emotions is more powerful than a person who is controlled by them. When someone insults you and you don't react, they lose all power over you. When a situation tests your patience and you remain calm, you become the master of your mind. Mastering the gap between event and response is not about suppressing anger. It's about transcending it. It's about realizing that most things in life are not worth the emotional toll we place on them. The next time you feel anger rising, remember this. You are not your emotions. You are the observer of your emotions. And the more distance you create between yourself and your reactions, the more control you have. At the core of Stoicism lies one fundamental truth. The only thing you truly control in life is yourself. You cannot control how others act, what they say, or what they do. But you can control how you respond, and in that response lies your true power. Part 3. The shocking realization. You are feeding your own anger. There is a fire burning inside you. You may not see it, but you feel it. Every time someone disrespects you, every time life doesn't go your way, every time something reminds you of past wounds, that fire flares up. It consumes you, takes over your actions, and leaves you drained. But here's the shocking truth. That fire only exists because you keep fueling it. Without fuel, even the fiercest blaze dies out. Most people believe that anger is something that happens to them, an external force that takes control against their will. But anger does not survive on its own. It needs a source. It needs repetition. It needs you to keep feeding it with thoughts, justifications, and endless mental rehearsals of what happened. Every time you replay an insult, every time you justify your rage, every time you convince yourself that your anger is valid, you are adding fuel to the fire. Marcus Aurelius understood this better than anyone. He once wrote, "A boiling kettle stops whistling when you remove the fire." What he meant was simple. Anger, like steam, only exists when it is constantly fed with heat. Take away the heat and the noise stops. Take away the fuel and the fire dies. But most people do the opposite. Instead of removing the heat, they turn up the flame. Instead of letting go, they hold on tighter. Instead of diffusing their anger, they amplify it. And then, they wonder why they remain trapped in their emotions. Think about the last time you were furious. Did your anger go away immediately, or did you keep thinking about it? Did you let it pass naturally, or did you replay the situation in your head over and over again? If you're like most people, you nurtured your anger. You kept it alive by justifying it, analyzing it, telling yourself why you had every right to feel the way you did. But here's what nobody tells you. Anger does not stay unless you invite it to. It knocks on your door, but you are the one who decides whether to let it in and serve it tea. Imagine for a moment that someone insults you. If you ignore it completely, what happens? Nothing. The moment passes. Life moves on. But if you dwell on it, if you take their words personally, if you replay it in your mind and let it fester, suddenly the insult takes root. It grows into resentment, into frustration, into rage, and then, long after the actual event is over, you are still suffering from something that no longer exists anywhere except in your mind. This is where the real trap of anger lies. It is not in the event itself. It is in the prolonged attachment to it. This is what makes anger different from natural emotions like fear or joy. When something scares you, the fear fades as soon as the threat is gone. When something makes you happy, the joy lingers but does not demand constant attention. But anger is different. It requires your participation. It needs you to keep thinking, keep replaying, keep justifying, otherwise it would disappear. To truly understand this, consider an experiment. Picture a Stoic, a person trained in the art of emotional control, standing in front of an aggressive, insulting man. The man screams, mocks, provokes, but the Stoic remains unmoved. He does not react, he does not flinch, he does not let a single muscle betray anger. Eventually, the aggressor tires himself out, realizing that his words have no effect. He grows silent, confused, powerless. What just happened? The Stoic did not feed the anger. Without a reaction, the confrontation ended before it even began. Now compare this to how most people respond. An insult is met with retaliation. A raised voice is met with an even louder one. A disrespectful comment spirals into a full-blown argument. Each reaction adds fuel to the fire, making the situation worse. But if you break the cycle, if you refuse to play the game, the fire dies instantly. This is why some people never seem to get truly angry. It's not that they don't experience frustration. It's that they refuse to give it oxygen. They understand that most things are not worth their energy. They know that an argument, a rude comment, a temporary inconvenience, all of it is just fleeting noise, and they refuse to let that noise control their inner world. If you want to test this for yourself, try this simple exercise. Think of the last time you were angry. Now ask yourself, if I had not reacted, would it still have mattered? If I had walked away, ignored it, or simply let it go, would my life be any worse? In most cases, the answer will be no. Because anger is rarely about the event itself. It is about our refusal to detach from it. There is an incredible power in realizing that you are not your anger. Anger is not some permanent part of your identity. It is not an uncontrollable force. It is a reaction, a habit, a mental pattern that can be broken. And the way to break it is simple. Stop feeding it. The next time you feel anger rising, pause and ask yourself, what if I just let this go? Watch what happens when you do. Watch how quickly the situation loses its grip on you. Watch how much lighter you feel when you refuse to carry the weight of unnecessary resentment. At the end of the day, anger is a choice. Not always in the moment, but in the moments after. You may not always be able to prevent the initial spark, but you always have the power to decide whether to fan the flames or let them die. If you want to be free from anger forever, you must start seeing it for what it truly is, a self-created prison that you alone have the key to escape. Once you stop fueling the fire, once you stop giving energy to things that do not serve you, you will realize something extraordinary. The things that once angered you will no longer have power. The people who once provoked you will become insignificant. The situations that once consumed you will lose their grip, because you will finally understand that anger was never something you had to fight. It was something you simply had to stop feeding. Part 4. The rapid anger neutralization system. 5 seconds to erase rage. There is a moment, so brief it often goes unnoticed, when you stand at a crossroads. It is the moment between the trigger and your reaction, between the insult and your retaliation, between the frustration and your decision to explode. Most people never even realize it's there. They move through life reacting impulsively, believing their emotions dictate their actions. But this moment holds the key to everything. In just 5 seconds, you can transform from someone controlled by anger into someone who controls it. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. They saw anger not as an unavoidable force, but as a mental weakness, a failure of self-control. And they developed a powerful system to neutralize it before it could take over. It's based on 3 awakenings, 3 truths that once you fully internalize will make anger powerless over you. The first awakening is this: anger does not solve problems, it makes them worse. Think about it. Has losing your temper ever truly improved a situation? Has yelling, lashing out, or holding on to resentment ever made you feel stronger? People convince themselves that anger is useful, that it fuels action, that it gives them an edge. But this is a lie. Anger clouds judgment. It leads to reckless decisions, broken relationships, and regret. The ancient Stoics knew that a leader, a warrior, a thinker, anyone who sought true power, could not afford to be ruled by anger. Marcus Aurelius, a man who commanded an empire, reminded himself daily, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Strength does not come from uncontrolled outbursts. It comes from clarity, from the ability to act rather than react. The second awakening is even more shocking. Anger is not something that happens to you. It is something you choose. Most people reject this idea immediately. They say, "I can't help it. When something unfair happens, I just get mad." But that's an illusion. Emotions arise, but whether or not you act on them is always a choice. If you truly had no control, if anger were as automatic as breathing, then you would react with the same intensity every single time. But you don't. There are times you suppress it, when your boss insults you and you bite your tongue, when someone cuts you off in traffic and you choose to let it go. If you can control it sometimes, that means you can control it all the time. The only difference is awareness. The third awakening is what separates those who are enslaved by their emotions from those who master them. The strongest person in the room is always the one who controls themselves. Anger gives the illusion of dominance. People who shout, who rage, who slam doors and throw punches believe they are displaying power. But real power is silent. It is the ability to stay composed when others lose their heads. It is the ability to make decisions based on logic, not impulse. When someone insults you and you do not react, you win. When life frustrates you and you remain unmoved, you win. The moment you realize that emotional control is the ultimate strength, you stop seeking the cheap high of outbursts and start pursuing the deeper power of self-mastery. There was once a man who embodied these 3 awakenings so perfectly that it changed the entire course of his life. His name was James, and for most of his years, he was a slave to his temper. A single mistake by an employee would send him into a rage. A minor inconvenience would ruin his entire day. He justified it, telling himself that his anger was a sign of high standards, of passion, of refusing to tolerate incompetence. But in reality, it was making him weak. It was costing him relationships, respect, and his own peace of mind. Then, one day, something happened that shattered his entire perception. He was driving home when another car cut him off aggressively. His old self would have reacted immediately, honking, yelling, chasing the driver to make a point. But on this day, something different occurred. He hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. In that hesitation, he had a thought. I don't have to react. He took a breath. He let it go. And then something shocking happened. He felt free. For the first time in his life, he realized that his rage had never been about the other drivers, or the mistakes, or the disrespect. It had always been about his own inability to control himself. From that day forward, he changed. He made it his mission to master his mind, to catch himself before the fire ignited, and the more he practiced, the less anger had a grip on him. Within months, he was a different man. The same situations arose, the same frustrations, the same provocations, but they no longer had power, because he had taken it back. This is how fast the shift can happen. 5 seconds is all it takes. The moment you become aware of the space between the trigger and the response, you start reclaiming control. The next time anger begins to rise, try this. Pause. Before speaking, before reacting, before doing anything, take one deep breath. Then ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Is my reaction helping or harming me? Am I about to lose control or take control? These 3 questions will break the automatic loop of anger. They will force you to shift from an emotional response to a rational one. And with enough practice, they will rewire your mind entirely. To make this shift permanent, write down the last time you were angry. Then analyze it using the 3 awakenings. Did anger actually solve the problem? Could you have chosen not to react? Would you have been stronger if you had stayed in control? By doing this regularly, you will begin to detach from anger rather than identify with it. And once you detach, it loses its grip on you. Anger is an addiction, a mental habit that people justify because they've never questioned it. But now you are questioning it. Now you see the illusion for what it is. And once you see through it, you can never go back. You will no longer be a prisoner of your emotions. You will be the one holding the keys. Part 5. The 7-day challenge to erase anger, making Stoicism a lifestyle. Mastering your emotions is not something that happens overnight. It is not a switch you flip, but a muscle you build. The more you practice, the stronger your control becomes. That's why this is not just another concept to understand. It is a challenge to experience. Over the next 7 days, you will embark on a journey to reprogram your mind, to break free from the illusion of anger, and to prove to yourself that self-mastery is within your reach. If you follow this process with full commitment, by the end of the week, you will feel a profound shift. What once triggered you will seem insignificant. The emotions that once consumed you will lose their grip, because you will no longer be reacting, you will be choosing. Day 1. Observe and document your anger. Today is about awareness. You cannot change what you do not see. So, for the next 24 hours, your mission is simple. Every time you feel anger rising, pause and write it down. What triggered you? What thoughts ran through your mind? What did you feel in your body? The goal is not to judge, suppress, or control, only to observe. Most people live their entire lives reacting without realizing how predictable their anger is. But when you see it on paper, when you recognize the patterns, something powerful happens. You begin to detach. Anger stops feeling like an uncontrollable force and starts looking like a habit. And habits can be changed. Day 2. Apply the 10-second delay technique. Today, you will introduce a small but life-changing shift. Every time you feel yourself about to react in anger, pause for 10 seconds. Take a deep breath, count to 10, or simply remain silent. Those 10 seconds may seem small, but they create a gap between stimulus and response. And in that gap, you regain power. This is what separates the Stoic from the reactive person. You will notice that in most cases, anger evaporates the moment you delay it. You will see how many arguments never need to happen, how much energy is saved by simply allowing time to dissolve your emotions. Day 3. Respond with the opposite reaction. This is where the transformation deepens. Today, when someone does something that would normally make you angry, an insult, a rude comment, an inconvenience, you will respond in the exact opposite way. Instead of frowning, you will smile. Instead of snapping back, you will remain silent or say something neutral. This may feel strange at first, but it is a test. It is proof that you are not bound to your habitual reactions. Most people assume that their emotions dictate their responses, but today you will break that assumption. You will show yourself that you can choose a different reaction, and in doing so, you will weaken anger's control over you. Day 4. Imagine the worst-case scenario of reacting with anger. Anger often tricks you into believing it is useful, that it somehow benefits you. But today, you will expose this lie. The next time you feel angry, ask yourself, if I let this anger control me, what is the worst that can happen? Visualize the consequences. If you lash out, will you damage a relationship? If you react impulsively, will you regret it later? If you lose control, will it cost you peace, time, or even opportunities? Seeing this clearly will strip anger of its illusion. It will make you realize that anger never leads to anything good. It only ever costs you. And when you truly internalize this, letting go of anger no longer feels like restraint. It feels like liberation. Day 5. Write a journal entry about patience. Journaling is one of the most powerful tools in Stoicism, and today you will use it to cultivate patience. Write about a moment where you chose patience over anger. How did it feel? How did it change the situation? If you can't think of an example, write about what patience means to you, or how you aspire to handle emotions in the future. This exercise will do two things. It will reinforce your progress, and it will create a mental blueprint for how you want to respond moving forward. Every great Stoic kept a journal because writing transforms thinking. Today, you will experience that transformation for yourself. Day 6. Go an entire day without reacting to anything. This is the ultimate test. From the moment you wake up, you will adopt the mindset of an observer. No matter what happens, delays, inconveniences, rude people, unexpected challenges, you will not react emotionally. You will watch. You will detach. You will treat everything as if it is a passing storm, unable to affect the deep stillness within you. This is how a Stoic moves through the world, not as a slave to circumstances, but as a master of their own mind. If you complete this day successfully, you will realize that you are stronger than your emotions. You will feel something rare and powerful, complete control over yourself. Day 7. Reflect on your journey and recognize the change. Look back at the last 6 days. Compare how you felt on day 1 versus now. What has shifted? Do the same triggers still hold the same weight? Do you feel lighter, calmer, more in control? The key to permanent change is recognizing progress. The more you acknowledge your growth, the more you reinforce the identity of someone who is no longer controlled by anger. Today is not the end. It is the beginning. A Stoic does not simply practice for a week. A Stoic lives this way. And from this moment forward, so will you. The challenge is simple, but the results are profound. If you commit to these 7 days, you will never look at anger the same way again. What once triggered you will seem insignificant. What once consumed you will feel distant, because you will have stepped into a new way of being, one where you control yourself and not the other way around. Now, the final step. Share your experience. If you took this challenge seriously, leave a comment below. What changed for you? What moment stood out the most? The more we share, the more we learn. The more we apply, the more we grow. And the more we practice, the more we become untouchable. Anger is not real. It is not something that controls you. It is not a force that exists outside of your mind. It is just a habit, a pattern you have been repeating for years, until today. You have now seen the truth. You have learned how to step back, how to take control, how to stop feeding the fire. And if you apply what you've learned, if you take on the 7-day challenge, you will experience something extraordinary: freedom. True strength is not found in rage, in retaliation, in outbursts. It is found in composure, in the ability to remain calm when the world is trying to shake you. This is what the Stoics mastered, and now, so can you. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire. Epictetus was born a slave, yet both of them lived by the same principle. You don't control what happens, but you always control how you respond. This is where real power lies, not in controlling others, not in controlling circumstances, but in mastering yourself. Now, it's your turn. Take on the 7-day challenge and see for yourself how different life feels when you are no longer a prisoner of your emotions. Share your experience in the comments. What was the most powerful realization for you? What moment tested you the most? And most importantly, how did it feel when you chose not to react? Your journey will inspire others. If this video helped you, like, share, and subscribe so that more people can break free from their anger. Every time you choose peace over rage, you are not just changing yourself, you are changing the world around you. And I'll leave you with this. If you master your mind, you master your life. The question is, are you ready to take that power back?